Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of True Crime Guru for 2024. I apologize if I sound a little stuffy. I am just getting over a cold. I am really excited to see what this year brings for the channel and am looking forward to bringing you guys more content and better quality videos. To make sure that you don't miss out on any of this content, please remember to subscribe. Subscribing also helps support the channel and the cases that we cover. I also ask that you follow the channel on all social media platforms. There you can find important updates and information on how you can help out with these cases. Today's case is a very cold case that took place almost 40 years ago and literally has not been talked about since then. Today, we will be talking about the 1984 murder of Booker Lewis in Panama City, Florida. Booker's murder was sudden, unexplainable, and still unsolved to this day. It was a bustling Thursday morning on September 20th, 1984, in Panama City, Florida. Kids were heading to school and commuters were heading to their prospective offices. And Nellie Lewis should have been doing the same. But for Nellie, the day had already started off on a bad note. She was headed over to her Uncle Booker's bail bonds office because for the last 12 hours, she had become increasingly concerned for him. Her aunt and Booker's wife, Flossie, said that Booker left for the office around 7 p.m. the prior evening and had never come home or returned any phone calls. Flossie was not too concerned at first because, as a bail bondsman, it wasn't uncommon for Booker to have to head over to the office at the last minute and usually would be there pretty late. But despite this, no matter what, Booker always communicated with Flossie about where he was and if he wasn't going to be home. But on September 19th, he did not do this. And he also failed to answer or return any phone calls. So that's why Nellie is headed to his office this morning. She arrived around 8 a.m., and the answers to hers and Flossie's questions would come right away. Because as soon as Nellie opened the office door, right there was Booker in front of her. And it was obvious that something terrible had happened. Booker was lying on the floor of his office and had bled profusely through his shirt. The Panama City police arrived quickly, and unfortunately, Booker would be pronounced dead on arrival of an apparent gunshot wound. Police immediately secured the scene and began looking for any clues around the office that may shed some light on what happened here. But they would come up empty. There was no weapon found or any shell casings for that matter. There was also no sign of forced entry into the office, and everything appeared to be pretty undisturbed. And for me, that really isn't too surprising considering how Booker was found. He was found on his side with his feet pointing towards the door. To me, this means that Booker likely opened the door for his killer or killers and then was shot immediately after. Naturally, the Panama City PD started canvassing the neighborhood, asking everyone if they had heard or seen anything suspicious the night before. Several neighbors would report hearing gunshots around 8 p.m., but apparently that wasn't too unusual for this neighborhood around that time, which might explain why none of them had notified the police. But other than that, they did not have anything additional to provide that would explain what happened to Booker. The autopsy was conducted that same day, and it was confirmed that Booker died from a single gunshot wound to the chest. The medical examiner could not identify the exact weapon that was used, but theorized that it may have been a .38 caliber handgun, which unfortunately likely would not help police narrow down a suspect, as a .38 is a pretty popular weapon, especially in the 80s. It was also determined that Booker had been deceased for approximately 12 or 13 hours prior to the discovery of his body, which does corroborate with the gunshots heard by the neighbors around 8 p.m. on September 19th. And then Nellie discovered Booker's body the next morning around 8 a.m. In order to solve this murder, detectives needed to find out who their victim was. Booker Lewis was born in 1921 and was raised in Mississippi. After his service in the Second World War, Booker would find himself in Panama City, Florida, working as a PE teacher for the Bay County Public Schools. His wife, Flossie, also worked for Bay County as a nurse for the health department, and she would go on to be highly respected for her efforts in keeping the Black community of Panama City healthy. Booker was also a highly respected member of the community, not only as an educator, but also as a deacon and Sunday school teacher at the St. John's Baptist Church. He was also involved in many organizations. Alongside his teaching career, starting in 1967, Booker ran his successful bail bonds business. Booker did end up retiring from the school district in 1983, but would continue to operate his business. Overall, he and his wife dedicated their lives to the community and had no known enemies. Realizing that there was no reason for anyone specific to want Booker dead, it daunted on detectives that this murder was going to be a hard one to solve. Looking at the timeline more closely, Flossie informed them that when Booker left on September 19th, he was intending on going to the drugstore to pick up a few items and then head to the office. Sometime between 7:30 and 10 o'clock, Booker had missed a phone call, and I wasn't able to find any specific information about this phone call or who it was from. I also wasn't sure why the exact time of the phone call wasn't reported. I would assume that police could have easily obtained this information even in 1984. But it could very well be that the call had nothing to do with the murder. It could have easily been from Flossie or another family member who was worried about Booker. Detectives started to look at more traditional motives, such as robbery. Booker was well known in the community as a businessman and was also known to usually be wearing jewelry. However, Booker's jewelry, wallet, and cash were all found on his person at the scene, and the office did not appear to have been ransacked or burglarized. However, in a 1985 interview, a spokesman for the sheriff's office did say that they were not ruling out robbery completely, as it could have been the intention of the killer, but they got spooked after killing Booker and then left. This made a little sense to me. I could definitely see someone intending on burglarizing the bail bonds office, which may have had some cash lying around, especially in the 80s when cash was more prevalent. They may not have been expecting someone to be there so late in the evening, and when they found Booker, they killed him and then left without actually taking anything. The only thing that bothers me about that is the way Booker was found. As I mentioned, it really seemed to me like Booker had opened the door for his killer and then was shot very shortly after. And you don't exactly open the door for a robber. But if not robbery, then what? The sheriff at the time, Lavelle Pitts, told Janice Lucas with the Panama City News-Herald that they were looking at a lot of people, specifically people who were associated with Booker through his business. As a bail bondsman, Booker was obviously associated with a lot of criminals. But I also have a lot of trouble coming up with a reason for a criminal to kill their bail bondsman. The only thing that I could come up with is bail bondsmen do sometimes utilize bounty hunters or skip tracers who track down criminals who have skipped bail. I have no idea if Booker utilized these practices or not, but if he did, that may have pissed off some criminal who was obviously avoiding incarceration, and they may have had it out for him because of this. But circling back to robbery and what I said about the person not expecting anyone to be at the office. A criminal who knew Booker would know that he was 63 years of age, respectively. Maybe they didn't think that someone of that age would be working so late and thought that robbing the bail bonds office later in the evening would be a quick robbery and a good idea. Now let me lay out a possible scenario. Someone who knew Booker through his business decided to rob his office on the evening of September 19th, 1984. This person was not expecting Booker to be there and was possibly fumbling with the office door trying to get inside. Booker hears this and then goes to the door to see what is going on. The robber opens the door to find Booker standing right in front of him. Because this person knows Booker, they know that Booker can identify them. So they panic and shoot him and then flee. Of course, I have no idea if this is what actually happened, but it was a scenario that played in my head when considering someone associated with Booker being the killer. When considering any other possible theories in Booker's murder, I did come across something interesting in a 1985 article in the Panama City News-Herald, written by Mike Cazales. It mentions that something in the investigation had led police to interview someone in South Florida. Now, if you don't know Florida very well, it is a very long state, 447 miles or 721 kilometers long. And Panama City sits on the Florida Panhandle. So it really makes me wonder what lead could have possibly led them all the way to South Florida. I can only speculate that maybe a lead led them to a possible transient that was passing through Panama City at the time of Booker's murder, and then maybe ended up in South Florida. Another thought that I had was maybe someone who was living in Panama City suddenly relocated to South Florida shortly after the murder. It is very common for killers to leave the area after committing a crime as a way to distance themselves. The article did mention that the interview did not lead investigators in any sort of direction. For all we know, this could have just been another dead lead. Sheriff Lavelle Pitts did also say something in a 1984 article with the Herald. He said that there were no other motives that, wait for it, they would like to talk about at this time. I found that to be a very interesting way to word that because what other motives? Was there something else in Booker's life that detectives came across and were keeping close to the vest? And if so, why have they kept it secret for all of these years, especially with the murder being unsolved? However, a year later, a spokesman with the sheriff's office did say, quote, "The fact that we have yet to come up with a motive and we're still running down everything we've got," end quote. So maybe I was just reading into this quote about other motives a little too much. I tried to search newspaper archives to possibly link any other robberies or murders from around that time to Booker's murder, but there were a lot, so it was really hard to narrow anything down, which got me wondering what crime looks like in Panama City. Looking at this map that I found on crimegrade.org, the red areas are where violent crime is heavier, and Booker's office was around here. Crime Grade also reported that Panama City is in the 16th percentile for safety, meaning that 84% of cities are safer and 16% are more dangerous. Combine that with the map and the fact that the neighbors near Booker's office said that gunshots weren't that uncommon, I think we can conclude that Panama City is a more crime-heavy city. Which also might explain why Booker's murder is still unsolved. If there really is a lot of violent crime in the city, then police probably have a heavy caseload and might even be understaffed. This is not a case where I'm going to call out the police for not doing enough, because it really does seem like they followed every lead that came their way. Although I did read that Flossie reported losing contact with police pretty quickly. Which brings me to say that if you are or ever are in a situation where a loved one is murdered or missing, staying in consistent contact with law enforcement and staying on them really goes a long way in getting a case solved. After 1985, there was absolutely nothing else ever reported about Booker Lewis's murder, except for an overview of the case on uncovered.com, which is a wonderful resource for unsolved cases that I encourage everyone to check out. I find it really frustrating that someone like Booker Lewis, who was a pillar of the community, was murdered in such a fashion and then no one ever talked about it again. I really think that Booker's case would be a really good candidate for cold case playing card. Which, if you're not familiar, it is when cases are featured on playing cards for inmates around the country in hopes that someone might have information. I think it's very likely that whoever killed Booker probably found themselves incarcerated at some point after, and could have possibly talked about the murder. If the case is not already featured on a playing card, I think that it would be a very good lead to follow if anyone from the Bay County Sheriff's Office is watching. Unfortunately, Flossie passed away in 1992 without ever knowing what happened to her husband. She told the Panama City News-Herald in 1985 about Booker, quote, "To me, he was the most wonderful person on earth," end quote. Booker Lewis also left behind 2 sons, his niece Nellie, and grandchildren, who all deserve to know what happened to their beloved Booker. If you have any information about the murder of Booker Lewis on September 19th, 1984, please reach out to the Bay County, Florida Sheriff's Office at 850-747-4700. You can also tip anonymously with the Panhandle Crime Stoppers at 850-785-8477, or submit a tip online at www.tipsubmit.com. Thank you everyone for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I encourage everyone to please share Booker's story. If you did enjoy this video, please hit the like button, and do not hesitate to utilize that comment box. While you're at it, please subscribe and turn on notifications so when future content is released, you will be the first to know. I also encourage engagement on social media, so please follow the channel on all platforms. If you have a case that you think I should cover, please email your suggestion to truecrimeguru@gmail.com.